Well, somebody asked me about points-making prizes, because that's what it's all about, isn't it, with certificates and that kind of thing. You remember all those sort of school sports days and all that wonderful time when you run down there, you've won the race, and then you get this wonderful certificate. Is it the same with EU and cyber security, was what I thought about. And the first thing that came to my mind was points-making prizes, and what's the most famous example of points or no points-making prizes, and that's ABBA here, who in 1974 won the Eurovision Song Contest, despite the UK awarding them nul point, as we say. But anyway, I hope that over the course of the next few minutes or so, we will score rather more than nul point. So I'm going to quickly run through the risks, just to give you another reminder, one of these other yet more scarce stories, but maybe some slightly different figures than you've heard before and in a slightly different context. And then I'm going to run through this EU approach to certification because, as you've seen on the screen there, I've put a bit on the IASME experience. I've been a special advisor to IASME, which is now the sole UK cybersecurity certification body. Crikey, talk about acronyms earlier, but EU cybersecurity, tongue twisters are getting much more difficult, I think. So we'll go on to a quick bit of IASME, and I need to give you a forewarning here that the EU approach to certification in this area is rather different to the approach that we've undertaken in the UK. Quite complex. It's, in my view, a bit further behind the times, as it were, behind the scene, compared to the UK. But that means that there's masses of golden opportunity for an awful lot of cybersecurity companies represented in this conference. But there's quite a bit of complexity to get around, and there's lots of different countries who are trying to do something slightly sort of different in their own little patch, but at the same time we've got European Commission, European Parliament trying to draw them together, so at least there's some kind of coordination across Europe. Europe, the other side of the channel in any event. Right, so most important business risks in 2024. This is produced by Europe's largest insurance company, Allianz, which also happens to be Europe's largest law firm, because there are so many lawyers working for Allianz on trying to fight people who are coming up with cybersecurity incidents and wanting payment on insurance policies. There's quite a team there. So you'll see there, surprise, surprise, cyber incidents are right at the very top from Allianz's survey. If we have another look at something else, this is AXA, so France's largest insurance company. They've done a survey as well. Surprise, surprise, from my perspective, from what I've been doing more recently, climate change is definitely the thing that we all need to worry about, and hardly mentioned in the US elections, hardly mentioned here. We've just had a big talk on aspects of AI, no mention of the fact that actually if you do a question sort of search through an AI system, as opposed to just doing something simple over Google, you're burning up 33 times as much electricity. That's not particularly good for the planet. So these sorts of things, climate needs to be worked into all cybersecurity discussions, and planet as well, because it's not just about climate, it's all about biodiversity, as we've seen in Cali in the COP16, which finished last week, not particularly conclusively, sadly, and a whole load of other related issues as well. So do bear that in mind too. Geopolitical instability, that seems to have taken a turn for the worse in the last 24, 48 hours or so. But hey, makes it much more entertaining, isn't it? At least you've got things to follow and talk about over the coming year or two. And then number 3 is cybersecurity risks, which are obviously very prevalent, and particularly lots of talk about that in the election. Much in the US, much more talk about that in the US election than was about saving the planet. That's for sure. Oh, and somebody else has got in on the act. This is a slightly different approach. This is the World Economic Forum. And they list their top 10 global risks. These are the ones for 2024. And you'll see there, it's the purple things that you need to worry about if you've got a cybersecurity hat. Comes in at number 4 on this one, over a 2-year horizon. And then, of course, it looks like we've all got our act together, because in 10 years' time, it falls to number 8 in that prediction. I'm not entirely sure that's because we're going to get our cybersecurity act together, or whether actually because we have been ignoring all the stuff about climate and planet, that all the climate and planetary risks there are going to creep up the table. As you can see there, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that is something we really do need to be paying attention to. And of course, we can be very helpful with that, because a lot of the AI tools can be used to help us sort that out as well. So another area of some absolutely fantastic golden opportunity. Gosh, sorry, I just saw the clock then. It says 24 minutes. That's a bit of a surprise. Got a long time to chat about certain things. Good. This is a slightly different view of the slide I did previously, which looks at the perceived risks. So this is going to people and say, select 5 risks you think are going to be most likely to present a material crisis at global level in 2024. And there we've got extreme weather, so some people are waking up to the fact that a house is being flooded out. All those pictures from Spain, we all thought Spanish driving was probably pretty bad, but actually some of the pictures which have come back, even the Spaniards don't drive that badly, so something really has happened, which is pretty dramatic. Then you get into second, AI-generated misinformation and disinformation. More than half the people surveyed thought that was going to be a really big problem. And then cyber attacks coming in at number 5 there at 39%. So put all that together, we are certainly in the right industry. I mean, if you're not feeling job security at the moment, go and talk to some people. Business storm outlook, I really like this one, trying to combine 2 major strands going on at the moment. This is looking at how sort of unstable issues are going to get over the next time horizon, which here goes from 2 years to 10 years. And you can see there that there's a big increase from 3% to 17% in people thinking global catastrophic risks are looming, and it's getting pretty stormy. And those who think actually it's going to be nice and calm, you know, that reminds me of another military expression, that there are 3 types of people in this world. There are people who make things happen, there are people who watch things happen, and there are people who wondered what the hell happened. So maybe they're the calm lot, but they're sort of decreasing quite considerably. And of course, I've got the part of the graveyard shift, so I couldn't resist putting a picture up of the graveyard where, you know, this is our ultimate destination, so we're all excited about this, aren't we? But in a cyber context, this is pretty worrying, because studies say that 80% of SMEs which hit a major cyber incident are dead in 2 years. Not physically dead, but, you know, commercially gone. So do remind that if you're having a chat with a CEO of some SME who seems to think that your services are not really that necessary. Right, time to move over to matters European on this. There's been a little bit of a mention of law in certain contexts earlier today. The last one was on the EU AI Act. This is a pretty important act. Has anybody read it here? Oh yes, it's not just me. I'm delighted. For those of you who just want to keep a little bit of a track along it, the EU have been really obliging on this. So you can all get onto your phones and search for the EU AI Act newsletter, and it will tell you what's going on in terms of AI and developments there. Actually quite useful. A lot of the European stuff is starting to get much more practical and, dare I say it, much better than you'll be seeing coming out of the UK. So, cybersecurity context in Europe. I mean, when it all started off, a lot of people sort of turned around and said, oh, for goodness sake, do we have to look at cybersecurity laws as well? Can't we just stay somehow with what we've got? We've just gone through this massive exercise in looking at data protection. So can we not just forget about cybersecurity and just tie it all onto GDPR? That's pretty much what the policy was to start with. We're going to stay with GDPR. We're going to hang all our cybersecurity clothes on that GDPR peg. And Europeans have been absolutely flipping cock-a-hoop about GDPR. Sorry, I haven't got the other slide I've got at the moment, but I can describe it quite quickly. The view is that the cyber world has basically sort of developed into two sort of hemispheres, if you like. One is very much US-centric, with lots of very well-known US cyber companies, which we all know and, if not love. Then there's a reflection of that, which I introduced my daughters to when we had a trip around China, and none of their anglicised sort of stuff worked because you have to sign up onto WeChat and Weibo and all these other sort of Chinese versions of the same thing. And they're very big and very advanced, actually, in certain respects, much more advanced than some of the stuff that we've got. But you've basically ended up, I thought, with these two sort of hemispheres. The Europeans have been trying to get in on the act, but obviously with things like sort of Skype having been developed and then bought out by certain other people, as soon as anybody develops something pretty much in Europe, it gets bought out, and we haven't really, comparatively, globally, got a European hard-hitting sort of cyber industry by comparison with what the Chinese are doing and what the Americans are doing. This has finally been noticed in Brussels, and there's a load more measures coming through and a load more money and a load more support, and there is another golden opportunity for everybody in this room. Because the EU sort of digital space is growing really quickly, and they haven't got the same sort of skill sets as we've got over here in the UK. So there's loads of opportunity going. The next thing is that GDPR, because it became quite successful, to the extent that I think last year there were more conferences on GDPR in the States than there were in Europe, which says a few things. So the Europeans are really pleased because basically we're regulating the whole of the world, and a lot of EU cybersecurity ideas are funneling their way through even into China, for example. I'm not going to go into Chinese law today. You'll be delighted to know. But the European side of it is quite important, and you'll see there's a big block on the left-hand side which flows out of that big grey circle entitled legal framework, and there's an awful lot of measures starting to come through there. So some of those you will need to get a grip of or come and have a chat. And then as well as the legal framework, there is a sort of cooperation governance community which is being set up as well. Okay, so one of the big mistakes that I think all my fellow lawyers make is that law is treated as something which is absolutely sacrosanct. And of course, politicians have the same sort of view. I have put through 29 laws in the King's speech this year. Isn't that wonderful of me? Oh, thank you so much. Do you know any of them? And law is not just about writing the laws out. It's actually an ecosystem, and nobody really looks much at the ecosystem about how those laws are explained to people. What does that mean in practical terms? What are you as cybersecurity specialists meant to be doing as a result of GDPR when it applies to you on a day-to-day basis or on a strategic basis or operational? And then what about if you don't do that properly? We all start thinking about enforcement, but enforcement is difficult. And it's hugely expensive. It's the worst element of the compliance chain, as I call it, to get involved in. So start off by making sure that you've got some authority for your policies and procedures when you put them in place, when you're taking them out of whatever cybersecurity regulation applies to you, and build it in and get some proper training in. Training which is not just awareness, but training which is getting people to do certain things. Previous guy, Graham, is ex-military as well, and the military training, I think, is just fantastic. And here's another one who's walked in who's had a fair bit of military training, as the colonel appears from the back. But this is really in there to make sure you do things. So I know full well what I'm going to do as soon as somebody breezes in the back there and opens up with a machine gun. Because that has actually really been drilled into me in my earlier training. That's real training. That's getting me to do something. It's getting me to change my behavior. It's getting me to do it in a way which is going to save me. So when you look at your training, please make sure, A, that it's interesting, B, that you've got an idea about what you're trying to really achieve in terms of behavioural change, and making sure that this is all for the good of your company, if not for the good of mankind, and womankind, of course. So that's your European cybersecurity context, and a bit on the ecosystem there. I could go into detail on that, but I'm now down to 14 minutes, so we'll move on. The EU Cybersecurity Act, this came out as, it's called an act, but it's actually a regulation. Regulations are not the same as directives, and that's a point which is quite often missed. So regulations sort of come into force and they're instantaneously applicable. Okay, but this is law in the raw. It's come straight through at European level, and it doesn't need to be implemented and go through some member state implementation process. Directives, on the other hand, are different, and directives do have to have some flesh put on them, and the way the flesh is put on them is through local governments and local sort of government ministries. So in our case, DCMS, for example, will be working out a few bits of subordinated legislation and bringing in and putting some flesh on the bones. It's quite funny when you look at some of these other little member states of the European Union around, because even if it's a directive which needs to be implemented in, say, Luxembourg, usually what the Luxembourgeois do is just take the French version of the whatever's come out of the European Union and just put a whole load of Luxembourg stamps on it, and there you are. Now that is Luxembourg law. So there's not much in the way of flesh put on those particular bones. EU Cybersecurity Act regulation has been in force since 2019. This came into review, another acronym here, ENISA's mandate. So ENISA is sort of a bit like our wonderful National Cybersecurity Centre, but in a European sort of context. It doesn't quite do the same sort of things as the NSRC, but it does try to coordinate things a bit better, and I'll come into another slide which will explain that in a bit more detail. It also established this new European Cybersecurity Certification Framework, the ECCF. For those of you who love acronyms, I'm going to give you at least another half dozen to a dozen gifts. And it provides a mechanism to establish European cybersecurity certification schemes. Okay, so this is not going to be a scheme in itself, but this is going to regulate the schemes coming in. Now, of course, one of the things behind Europe is to make sure that things happen in one member state, which means that once you've gone through the process of one member state, then you can go to another member state without having to do the same stuff all over again from scratch. So the idea on cybersecurity certification, if I can get my words out, is that you certify once, and then that applies across the whole of the EU and possibly beyond. The reason I say possibly beyond is because there's an awful lot of other countries, and I know this is going to be really weird news to anybody who's a Brexiteer, but there's an awful lot of other countries who actually want to join the EU and develop things and develop an even bigger single market. So they are already implementing lookalike legislation. I mean, I've been over advising people in Azerbaijan, for example. Azerbaijani money laundering legislation, to give you an example of something I looked at when I was there, is remarkably similar to what's happening in Europe and the UK. So there's an awful lot of influence beyond Europe. It's like being in a planetary sort of solar system. So this is like legal gravity, if you like. So all the little planetary states are all having a bit of influence from the middle in terms of law, and it doesn't matter really in this extent whether you are inside or outside the EU. So that's something else to watch out for if you're involved in international strategy. So the certification is intended to create some trust by providing clarity and visibility to users. So you see, oh, hi, we've not met, but I can see that you've got the little EU badge on there. I know you've gone through the system. Nice to know you. We're already talking the same language. We're all already talking the same business. We are a few steps ahead of other people who are not able to do that because of the way things have been structured. Thank you very much to Brexit. We can get on with things an awful lot better, and it does help to create trust and hopefully build bigger companies as well. So yet more opportunity. The next view is to try and make cybersecurity a competitive advantage. Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? That actually we've got a positive spin on it, and it's not just that we've got some laws coming out and not more laws, yet more things to do. Yawn, yawn, yawn. But actually this is a bit of a competitive advantage. As we've already seen with GDPR, that's really helping European companies globally. And as at the moment, the UK still has effectively GDPR in there because we haven't diverged much from it, and we've got a little tick in the box at the moment which says that, yeah, on GDPR terms we can talk with Europeans and they can talk with us. It's another market opportunity as well. And the idea, going back to what I said about there not being so many European technological-based companies, is that this will help to provide EU technological leadership. The schemes which are going to come out are going to be tailored, and they're going to be risk-based. So we're going to have one cybersecurity certification framework, but many schemes underneath that. And the schemes are going to be tailored to specific ICT or IT products, but not just the cybersecurity products, but also the cybersecurity services and the processes. So that's a little bit broader in terms of approach than we've got here in the UK. And we're going to end up with a risk-based approach with basically 3 different levels of assurance. And as you see in the triangle on the right-hand side, they're going to be at a high level, substantial level, or basic right at the bottom. So what we're going to have in those certification schemes, there's going to be certain essential elements. To those of you who are having real trouble sleeping at the moment, I really do commend Article 54 of the Cybersecurity Act. And it will give you much more detail about whether, how much of a clear description of the subject matter, scope and purpose of the scheme has to be, the type or categories of the products, services or processes which you're intending to develop and export across the globe, because you've come to these conferences for many years now, you've got knowledge and skills second to none, and you're ready to take on the world, so why not seize this opportunity? All you've got to do is learn a little bit of French or German or Italian and eat some pasta, maybe to a greater degree than you already are. One or more assurance levels, references to international, European or national standards as well. Aspects of conformity, there's going to be a fair bit of self-assessment. The self-assessment route to those who've looked at Cyber Essentials, certainly in relation to IASME, will be well versed in this already. I'll give you some information on that shortly. And there'll be some specific evaluation criteria and methods to be used as well. So Article 54 of the Cybersecurity Act, pretty important stuff. What I recommend is when you're putting together all your Christmas cards to send to all your cybersecurity mates this Christmas, on the inside cover, just put a copy of Article 54 in there as part of your Christmas present to them. It's going to be a voluntary tool, but based on a collective effort. So the people sort of involved are European Commission, surprise, surprise, ENISA, surprise, surprise, the member states and industry as well. So the general idea there is to have involvement between all sectors to make sure that we get something which is efficient and actually works. We have an attempt at this kind of stuff in the UK, and I've quite often responded to HM Treasury or various other government department consultation documents. It's a little bit of a rigid process, though, and unless you are actually on the government's experts group, it's quite difficult trying to get your message in from the outside. So, if you are at that sort of level and you're on the policy side, or you need to be on the policy side to get certain things developed within your company, do see if you can work out whether there is an experts group and whether you can sneak your way onto it. Even if you can't do that, then go and have a look at some of the APPGs, the all-party parliamentary groups, and the ones on cyber, on AI, and so on are actually pretty good, and gives you access to a load of people who are making policy within Parliament, within government, and within industry as well, and you can get in there and attach yourselves to them. So that's quite useful. Nice little tip to get involved in that kind of thing. The wine's a bit ropey, I have to say, but you know, you can always go out to a local pub afterwards. So there will be a European Common Criteria-based cybersecurity certification scheme, the EUC, or the EUCC. One scheme for the whole union, as I mentioned before. Legal basis of this particular scheme, once you've got through Article 54, go backwards a bit to Article 49, sub-Article 7, because that's where all the action is happening for the legal basis there. And as I mentioned before, again, it's a targeting of products, of services and processes as well. And that's what you're going to end up with. Possibly not as attractive as your school sports day certificate of coming first, but there's your cybersecurity certification as it will come up with a QR code on it as well. Gosh, things have advanced, haven't they? And if you didn't get a snap of that one, this is, I think, pretty much the same code on that. This introduces a few more acronyms for those of you who haven't had enough of them yet today. So this builds on the SOGIS, which is the Senior Officials Group Information Security Group thing. So this is the senior people at European level who are talking about cybersecurity in SOGIS. They're like the European national member state equivalents of NCSC. Yep, good. I can see somebody stood up very quickly. So, despite the fact that I've got over 2 minutes left. Anyway, so this is well worth a picture if you're doing European sort of stuff, because this is a list of the SOGIS members at the moment. You'll see these are National Cybersecurity Centre equivalents in and around Europe. You might need to get in touch with them depending on what your products are, which you're developing through. This Cyber Resilience Act is also something else to have a look at. This is meant to be coming into force any day now, full applicability coming through in 2027. I'm going to quickly scoot through that because I want. There's a list of resources there. If you want a copy of the presentation, do come and have a chat afterwards, or give me details or whatever, or look me up on LinkedIn and I'll send it to you via that. So there's quite a few useful resources there for your friends at Christmas time. I wanted quickly to run through the IASME experience because IASME has been quite important in the UK, was one of 5 certification bodies, won a tender, so it's now the sole one, and started doing self-certifications via a questionnaire scheme, which resulted in the development of Cyber Essentials. So the certification timeline there is from 2014, launching Cyber Essentials through to the Cyber Essentials Knowledge Hub, which was launched to celebrate the decade anniversary of Cyber Essentials. Isn't that exciting? So yeah, this has been quite useful. In 2022, for example, there were 30,000 Cyber Essentials certificates released, and we're now up to about 100,000 of them or so, which is quite a good result in one respect. But on the other respect, if you have a look at Companies House, you'll find that there's 6 million companies registered at Companies House. Okay, not all of them are going to be in a sort of position where they'll need any cybersecurity stuff, because they're put in there to hold intellectual property, for example, or something like that. But quite a useful scheme. Anybody here members of or done Cyber Essentials? I can see quite a bit of nodding. Good. Cyber Essentials Plus. Ooh, even better. Good stuff. So very quickly on strategic considerations, threatscape is constantly growing, as we know, but there's lots of opportunity in that. Where there's a threat, there's an opportunity. It's young, it's rapidly developing, but it is still quite disparate. The certification stuff has been very helpful. EU approach is broader, but still developing. So basically, watch developments pretty closely is what I would say to you. Thank you very much.